Have you ever stopped to think that maybe not everything we call a myth is pure invention? Since ancient times, humanity has collected accounts of legendary creatures, terrifying encounters, and mysterious apparitions. What's curious is that, even with all the advances of science, there are still mysterious beings that simply defy explanation. And that's unsettling, isn't it? We live in a world where everything seems to have a logical answer, but what happens when logic fails? There are reports so consistent, fossils so intriguing, and unexplained sounds, like the famous Julia sound, that challenge even the most skeptical scholars. It's at this point that the line between myth and reality begins to blur, opening the door to a new question: what if ancient legends hold more truth than we ever imagined? Get ready to dive into a universe where cryptozoology meets science, where marine fossils resurrect creatures described millennia ago, and where stories of werewolves, phantom dogs, and sea monsters become far more real than comfortable. After meeting these 12 creatures, you might never look at what you once called fantasy the same way again. The figure of the werewolf is, without a doubt, one of the most popular among mythical beings. Found across different cultures, this creature merges man and wolf in a terrifying transformation under the light of a full moon. They say that, in those moments, the human body stretches, hair grows, and animal instincts take control. It's not just a horror movie curse. Some believe this phenomenon may have roots in real disorders. There is, in fact, a condition called clinical lycanthropy, where a person genuinely believes they are an animal. Rare as it may be, this disorder has been documented in various medical reports, especially during the Middle Ages. At that time, any unusual behavior was often interpreted as a sign of possession or witchcraft. The myth of the werewolf thrived in that context, fueled by fear, ignorance, and stories whispered from mouth to mouth during the darkest nights. But its oldest origin goes back to Greek mythology, with King Lycaon. According to legend, he was transformed into a wolf by Zeus as punishment for serving human flesh to the gods. From this story comes the word lycanthrope itself. What's fascinating is how this fusion of the divine, the animal, and the human echoes a deeper message: the danger of surrendering to our most savage instincts. So, is the werewolf just a metaphor, or a dark echo of something that might have once existed? In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) recorded an underwater sound so powerful it was detected by microphones more than 3,000 miles away. The noise was named the Julia sound, and to this day no one has been able to precisely explain its origin. The first hypothesis was that it came from a giant whale, but no known species is capable of producing a sound with that frequency and intensity. That's when the theories began. Some scientists suggested that perhaps there are marine creatures yet to be catalogued living in the deepest parts of the ocean, which, frankly, is not impossible. It's estimated that we know less about the ocean floor than we do about the surface of the moon. And what if that sound came from some mutant species, the result of underwater radiation, or even from a process of deep-sea evolution that never surfaced? It may sound like science fiction, but it's right there in NOAA's records. The mystery of the Julia sound reignited interest in creatures like the Cadborosaurus, the Leviathan, or even monstrous versions of whales and giant squids. In cryptozoology, such reports aren't dismissed. On the contrary, they're treated as puzzle pieces linking science to mythology. After all, if fossils like the mosasaur have shocked us before, why couldn't a mutant whale be the next surprise of modern biology? Cyclopes are imposing figures of Greek mythology, known for having a single eye in the middle of their forehead. One of the most famous is Polyphemus, the Cyclops who confronted Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey. But beyond being brutal, savage monsters, these beings are also described as divine blacksmiths, forging Zeus' thunderbolts, giving them an almost sacred aura of power. Somewhere between terror and awe, Cyclopes have always been symbols of primordial strength. Interestingly, science may have shed some light on this legend. Archaeologists discovered skulls of dwarf elephants with a huge nasal cavity at the center, something that, at first glance, could easily be mistaken for a single giant eye socket. Imagine ancient people finding such a fossil without the knowledge of modern anatomy. The birth of a myth seems almost inevitable. This type of misinterpretation is far more common than we think when marine fossils or remains of large mammals are unearthed. This mix of scientific discovery and symbolic interpretation is fascinating. An elephant skull becomes a cyclops, a fossilized snake becomes a mythological serpent. Once again, the line between reality and legend becomes tangled. And who's to say they can't coexist? Cryptozoology thrives in this ambiguous space, where paleontological clues breathe new life into ancient legends, as we also see with the mysterious Vasuki indicus. In Hindu tradition, Vasuki is a colossal cosmic serpent said to have taken part in the creation of the universe, used by the gods to churn the cosmic ocean. A symbol of power, movement, and transformation, this mythical being inhabits sacred texts as a bridge between the divine and the earthly. For centuries, Vasuki was considered purely spiritual symbolism until something surprising came to light in 2023. Researchers in India announced the discovery of a massive prehistoric marine snake fossil. The fossil was named Vasuki indicus, in honor of the legend. It belonged to a type of ancient serpent, around 50 feet long, that swam the oceans millions of years ago. The resemblance to the myth was impossible to ignore mere coincidence or ancestral memory, passed down from generation to generation until it became a legend. This connection between paleontology and mythology forces us to rethink what we call fantasy. Perhaps ancient peoples had more contact with the past than we assume through fossils, remains, or even rare encounters. When modern science uncovers traces of what was described in millennia-old scriptures, it's hard not to shiver. If Vasuki leapt from sacred texts into laboratories, what else might be waiting to be unearthed? In Irish folklore, few figures are as eerie and terrifying as the Banshee. Described as a pale woman with long, disheveled hair, dressed in white or gray, she is known for her chilling wail, which echoes as a dark omen of approaching death. It is said that anyone who hears her cry must prepare, for a loss in the family is near. More than a myth, the Banshee became a symbol of humankind's ancestral fear of death foretold. Yet it isn't just terror. The presence of the Banshee carries deep emotional symbolism. In some versions, she isn't evil, but rather a messenger, a spirit mourning for both the living and the dead. Her cry can be understood as the sound of uncontainable grief, a collective sorrow echoing across generations. And let's be honest, who hasn't felt a sudden chill at night when the wind howls, or when some strange sound rises out of nowhere? Today, the Banshee has spread across the globe. She appears in horror films, video games, TV shows, and novels. Her image has evolved, but the essence remains the same, a being dwelling at the threshold between the living and the dead. Alongside other legendary creatures, she proves how certain myths endure, adapting, reborn, and perhaps waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves once again. Speaking of apparitions, let's meet the mysterious Cadborosaurus. Imagine sailing through the cold waters of the North Pacific and suddenly spotting a sea serpent gliding gracefully among the waves. That's the type of account linked to the enigmatic Cadborosaurus, one of the most talked about legendary creatures in Canada and along the U.S. coast. Described as having a long body, a horse-like head, and undulating movements, it has intrigued fishermen, sailors, and even biologists for over a century. One of the most curious episodes occurred in 1937, when fishermen found strange remains inside the stomach of a captured whale. The anatomical structures didn't match any known marine species at the time, and the material was photographed and studied by experts. Many believed the remains belonged to a young Cadborosaurus, reinforcing the idea that the seas may still hide secret science has yet to fully unravel. Despite the lack of conclusive proof, sightings continue. And every time a new case emerges, public interest in cryptozoology is reignited, this field that investigates beings not yet officially recognized, but constantly present in popular accounts. The Cadborosaurus, much like the Mothman, shows how the unknown keeps fueling our imagination. And that's exactly why we keep searching for answers and finding even more questions. In 1966, in the quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the first reports surfaced of a winged creature with glowing red eyes, nearly 7 feet tall. It was nicknamed the Mothman. Witnesses described chilling encounters with this being, which appeared and vanished in seconds, usually in isolated places like bridges or abandoned industrial areas. The most disturbing part? Soon after, a real tragedy struck the region. In December of 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio suddenly collapsed, killing 46 people. Many believed the Mothman had been a warning, a dark omen of the disaster to come. Since then, his figure has been linked to calamities and unexplainable events. He became an icon of modern cryptozoology, inspiring books, paranormal investigations, and, of course, theories that blend science and mythology in ways that are almost hypnotic. Today, Point Pleasant even hosts an annual festival honoring the Mothman, complete with a statue, museum, and plenty of local pride. What was once fear turned into tradition, but the mystery remains. Who was this creature? An unknown being? A collective manifestation of anxiety? Or a real, mysterious entity that briefly crossed into our world? The truth is, the Mothman still defies explanation, just like the next creature on our list, the gigantic and possibly still-existent Mosasaurus. If you've seen Jurassic World, you probably remember that striking scene where a marine reptile leaps out of the water and swallows a shark whole. That wasn't a Hollywood invention, it was the Mosasaurus, a prehistoric marine reptile that truly existed, dominating the oceans around 80 million years ago. Growing up to 55 feet long with a devastating bite, it was the terror of the deep. Now hayraced the curious part: in various regions around the world, especially in remote coastal areas, reports continue to surface of giant creatures resembling crocodiles, only far larger and more agile. Some independent researchers suggest that the Mosasaurus might not have gone completely extinct, and that isolated populations may have survived in inaccessible places, true living fossils, much like other species we once thought long gone. Official science urges caution, of course. But how can we ignore the striking parallels between these reports and the fossils already discovered? The history of biology itself is full of surprises. The coelacanth, for instance, was believed to have been extinct for millions of years until a fisherman pulled one up from the depths. That's why the Mosasaurus represents more than just a monster from the past. It's a reminder that the unknown may still be out there, swimming silently in deep waters, perhaps alongside entities like the Tanawa, which we'll meet next. In the waters and caves of New Zealand lives, in Maori imagination, a creature known as the Tanawa. This aquatic monster is portrayed in many forms, sometimes as a giant serpent, other times as a beast with dragon or shark-like features. To the Maori, the Tanawa can be both a protective guardian and a ruthless destroyer. It shapes the land, diverts rivers, and triggers earthquakes, acting as a living embodiment of nature's forces. Interestingly, many Tanawa sightings coincide with geologically unstable areas. Some say these appearances were symbolic ways of explaining natural phenomena: landslides, tremors, floods. Yet the vivid detail of the accounts and the respect with which the Maori treat this entity give the legend a unique weight. The Tanawa is not just a myth, it is woven into the land, spirituality, and identity of the people who revere it. Like other legendary creatures, the Tanawa challenges the Western view of reality. It shows how science and mythology can coexist as different ways of understanding the world. After all, if an entire culture acknowledges the existence of a being, doesn't that deserve to be studied as seriously as a fossil? And with that thought, we move to another dark creature that haunts the threshold of the visible, the spectral and chilling Barghest. Imagine walking alone at night through a forest or deserted road and suddenly seeing a gigantic dog with flaming eyes and pitch-black fur silently watching you. That is the Barghest, one of the most sinister legendary beings of English folklore. Its appearance is said to herald death or misfortune, and it roams graveyards, crossroads, and alleys, always in the shadows, always in silence. Much like Ireland's Banshee, the Barghest acts as a dark omen, though with an even more aggressive presence. Old accounts tell of people fainting or falling gravely ill after encountering it. Its name echoes in medieval songs, Gothic poems, and even ecclesiastical court records. And hayrace, the curious part, the Barghest inspired a range of modern horror figures, from the Hound of the Baskervilles to appearances in games and RPGs. Today, It lives on not necessarily on the streets of Yorkshire, but in the stories that circulate online and in the shadowy corners of pop culture. Whether real or not hardly matters, the Barghest embodies our ancestral fear of the unknown, of what cannot be tamed or explained. And if even the hounds of hell find a place in legend and belief, what about a biblical monster so powerful it shook the heavens themselves? Yes, we're talking about the colossal, enigmatic Leviathan. In the heart of biblical scripture, the Leviathan emerges as a creature of terrifying proportions, a sea monster, serpent, dragon, or even demon, depending on the translation. In Job 41, it is described as an unstoppable force, breathing fire and leaving destruction in its wake. For many scholars, the Leviathan represents primordial chaos, a symbol of what cannot be controlled in creation. But is it only that? Historical and maritime records mention encounters with giant sea monsters, many strikingly similar to the biblical description. And when creatures like the Mosasaurus are discovered, or mysterious recordings like the Julia Sound resurface, doubt creeps back in what if the biblical creature was partly inspired by a real being, one that once existed, or still does. In this sense, the Bible can be both spiritual truth and a symbolic chronicle of the ancient world. In pop culture, the Leviathan has never left the stage. It appears in films, TV shows, video games, and novels as a colossal, unstoppable force. Some even compare it to the Kraken or to Tiamat, the dragon of Babylonian myth. Whether as metaphor or monster, the Leviathan reminds us that the sea hides unimaginable secrets. And among those secrets, perhaps there exists an animal so extraordinary it became legend, like the next creature on our list, the surprising narwhal, known as the unicorn of the sea. In the Arctic's frozen waters lives one of the most fascinating creatures ever discovered, the narwhal. With a spiral tusk that can grow over 10 feet long, it earned the nickname unicorn of the sea. During the Middle Ages, its teeth were sold as authentic unicorn horns and fetched fortunes. It's even believed that Queen Elizabeth's crown contained one of these mystical treasures. But the narwhal is real. Not invention, not illusion. A living example of how nature itself can inspire real-world legends. For centuries, its anatomy baffled scholars. Today we know that the magical spiral is actually a highly sensitive sensory tooth, used to detect changes in water temperature and pressure. Still, its surreal appearance makes it easy to understand why it was mistaken for a mythical creature for so long. And now, after meeting these 13 legendary creatures that just might be real, tell me, how many of these stories did you once think were pure fantasy? And how many made you question what's myth and what might simply be an undiscovered reality? Sometimes, the unknown isn't far away at all. It lurks in the deep oceans, in untouched forests, or in the forgotten pages of an old book. The most amazing part is realizing that science and mythology don't have to stand on opposite sides. They can walk together, like two different lenses, helping us view the same mystery from new angles. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson here: keep an open mind. Question, investigate, imagine. After all, what would the world be if everything were already explained? If you love exploring the borderlands between the real and the impossible, then this is your place. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join me on this journey through legends, enigmas, and stories that defy common sense. Because the world is far stranger and far more fascinating than it seems.